How to Survive Until You're Published, Season 1, Episode 1. Why You Write.
Hello, and welcome to How to Survive Until You're Published, the podcast. Because if you're drowning in words, so are we, and you might as well not do it alone.
I'm Megan Irene. I primarily write fantasy and sci-fi. I have been writing since I was 8 years old, but more seriously, the past 5 years. And a random fact about me, I am Slytherin, and I like to collect mugs wherever I go.
Awesome. I am Amy Bell. I write primarily, romance, fantasy. I don't really want to
Romantasy.
Yeah, romantasy. I don't necessarily want to admit that I write romance, but that's kind of what I like. I have been writing since I was young as well. And I remember one of the first stories I wrote in a notebook, all in blue pen, and that is now why I hate blue pens. It just naturally came that way. And I also am a Ravenclaw, which shows the difference between our personalities.
Just a little bit.
Just a little. Megan's definitely the more go-getter between the two of us.
And Amy's the brains behind this operation.
So we met at a writing conference about 3 years ago. And
which is funny because we actually lived in the same neighborhood at the time,
for a while,
but
yeah.
We didn't know that until we met in a different city at a writing event.
Yeah, it's kind of awesome, and we've been kind of best friends ever since. And so we thought that it would be really fun since we've been on this writing journey for, both of us about 2 or 3 years, 4 years now, that we want to help you as you go into your writing journey. Neither of us are published, and I think that pulls a bit because we can understand where you're coming from, and that is part of why we want to go.
Yeah. So actually, this was super relevant to a different writing podcast because initially when we were starting this, I was like, oh, do we want to highlight that we're not published? Is that how we want to market this podcast? But then I was listening to another writing podcast, Writing Excuses, if you've heard of it, where Erin Roberts, and this was on season 18, episode 21 of their podcast, she talked about how you don't necessarily need to be this famous writer or really successful person to help others along their journey and to really start into yours. She used a great analogy of an elevator, but sometimes it's helping those at your same level and like pulling them along with you. So that's kind of our goal with this.
Yeah, that's why we're here. We're here to make sure you don't drown, because writing is hard and it takes a lot of work. And sometimes you need to just have somebody else that will just help you keep going, because it is rough.
Yes. We would also like to preface, though, that just because you get published doesn't necessarily make that easier, but it will be different, a different type of hard. But by that point in time, and hopefully with the help of our podcast and some other writing references that can help you get there, you'll have more tools to help you survive.
Yeah. So speaking of that, this upcoming season, we are going to talk about the craft of writing. Writing is huge. Just everything about writing is really big. But we want to focus on a few specific arcs. We're going to talk about characters, plot, world building, theme, and just give you some basic tools to help you to get your writing along. But even beyond that, there are a lot of things about writing that are rough. Talking about imposter syndrome, feeling like you're not a good enough writer, and then getting past writer's block is a whole different world. And so we're going to dig into those too. And as we keep going along, we'd love to hear from you. Please follow us on Instagram and leave some comments about things that you would like us to talk about.
Yes, any ideas, because we really want to gear this towards you and what can best help you. And you won't just have to hear from us along the way. We have already lined up a bunch of guest authors, all of whom are published. We'll probably bring on some other writers that we've met, just networking through writing conferences and other events that will come on and talk about their writing journey as well, just to give you a myriad of opinions and ways to approach how to survive your writing journey. And then at the end of the podcast season, we want to focus on NaNoWriMo and hopefully give you the tools in order to complete that. Because a lot of authors, I feel like, that have participated, it just teaches you so much about writing, participating in NaNoWriMo.
Yeah, we did it. We both did it last year, and it was rough for both of us.
It was.
But, yeah, it was hard. But I think it taught me just to push on and just keep going. And sometimes just getting words on the page, even if they don't make any sense and they're all out of order, it is important just getting it out there because it helps you to progress your story even in like a really fast-paced way, all doing it in a month. It's crazy.
To kind of refocus this episode though, before we launched into the craft of writing and giving you some of those basic fundamentals of a story, we wanted to discuss why we write. So Amy, why do you write? And why is that important to know?
Yeah, let's talk about why it's important first. So I've thought about this for a while. When I was young, I just had stories. I was in my creative writing class, and I was the kid that when we were given the assignment to write an autobiography, everybody else wrote a page or page and a half. I wrote 20 pages because I was that kid. I just loved to write stories, and it's fun to me. But as I've gotten older and I've thought about my process and about why I love to write, I started back up in 2020, just diving deep into writing, and I've kind of discovered along the way that characters are really my passion, that I've really thought about people and how people change and how they become better and how they grow, and it just is so fascinating to me. And especially like in love tropes, how people help change one another. It's really passionate to me. And so why I write is really just to bring that alive. And
I love that.
It's been taking me a long time to get there because it takes a lot of character development, a lot of practice, and I'm still definitely on that journey, but I have that goal in my mind to be able to really show people that others can change, and that when you feel down about yourself and about how you're feeling, that you can be better, and that's what I want to reflect in my writing.
I love that. Characters are just so important to writing. I think it was Brandon Sanderson actually that said at a conference we attended that character-driven stories are what's successful, just because they relate to humans. And that's kind of why people in general, I feel like stories, and we use stories, is to relate to the world and people around us. But yeah, that's great. I love that. But that's also why we're going to spend a lot of time talking about characters throughout the podcast.
Yeah. So, Megan, why do you write?
I feel like a lot of similar things. Also, when I was younger, I was that kid that wrote way more than I needed to. But I also didn't realize until a few years ago that it's not normal for everyone. And I'll say this, like, prefacing for everyone, because I'm not saying you're weird if this is how you are. But not everyone always has a story playing out in their head, or that they're thinking about, or the desire to want stories. I just thought it was normal to kind of have, like, these little things you think about from a young age, playing make-believe into writing that down. It was just always a story was important to me. And I think part of it stems from my love of reading. But going back to why I write, because it has changed drastically over the years. It was, I want to be published, or, I just want to write down the story because I can't get it out of my head. I think it relates back to characters as well. While I love writing fast-paced scenes a little bit more than I like diving deep into some of that stuff just because it's hard, I like to write to help people like process through emotion and challenges. Because I know for me, that's what I get the most out of stories, or when I get the most out of stories is when I can relate to a character going through a hard thing. Or I can learn to process different events and feelings through a fictional story. And I think that that's something wonderful that we have, and I'd love to be able to bring that to others.
Yeah, I love that. I was going to say, a few years ago, Jennifer Nielsen emceed the Storymakers Conference, which we're huge promoters of. We love Storymakers.
That's where we met. Yeah.
And she said something just similar to like what Megan said, that like writers are different. Writers are unique. There's something about a writer because not everybody has those stories in their head. Not everybody wants to put that down on paper. And so just know you are unique. If you're a writer, you are special. You have that ability to put those stories together. And if you have that, you owe it to yourself to do it, to write it down, and to push forward to try to put that story out there into the world.
I think not only that, but also acknowledging the fact that you are a writer. Even if you're not published, if you write words on a page, or if you come up with stories in your head, you tell people stories, and you have the desire to write and to create, you are a writer. You don't need published author by your name to preface the fact that you're an author and you're a writer and you're a creator. And I think that's something that everyone struggles with. I know I struggle with it a lot throughout their career and just their journey.
So, talking a little bit about imposter syndrome, Megan, you mentioned that is something you struggle with. So why has that been rough for you specifically?
I think just because in general, I do that with a lot of things in my life where I'm second guessing everything, especially when it comes to work I'm doing. I think part of it too is because when you're writing, it's like a piece of who you are that you're putting on the page. And so it's kind of scary to be like judged of people, right? And I just read so much, and I've always had it in my head that like, oh, the authors who are published, they've made it. That's what it is to be a writer. And so it's constantly like looking at my words that I've written compared to a published, edited book that's gone through so many iterations, has had numerous people looking over and combing through it, versus like a raw first draft manuscript, you know? And so I think that just comes back to the little self-doubt voices in my head, when it shouldn't be. I don't know. Yeah. It's kind of like, maybe you could elaborate on it more.
Yeah. No, I was going to say that like, it's kind of, I think about it like, I don't know if you've ever seen those videos of like models that like come in and it takes them like an hour to get them all make-upped, and then they use Photoshop to put them on the front of a magazine. It's kind of like that.
Yeah, it kind of is. You're comparing like a raw image to a Photoshopped, really well-edited, beautiful photograph, versus like your raw first draft manuscript to an edited, finished product, you know, and there's a lot of hard work that goes in between, which, like you said, is something we'll cover throughout this season, especially just as we're addressing more building a story and first drafts and manuscripts, because the first draft, it took me realizing your first draft is telling yourself the story, and it doesn't need to be perfect to kind of get over that. And I mean, I still have to constantly remind myself that the writing journey, like, comparison is not something that you should ever be doing in your writing journey. And it's really detrimental to it. That's where you get your writer's block. That's where you get stumped and you get discouraged. And it's better, I don't know, it's like that famous quote, comparison is the thief of joy. Because the writing community as a whole is so supportive of each other. So no one is necessarily comparing you like that, you know? Like, they're not thinking those things that you're thinking about yourself. They're just excited that you're writing, you know? And they love to share in that. But kind of gearing back to what we were talking about earlier, and the purpose of, like, why do you write? And the purpose of your writing, and the importance of it. I know you kind of already explained a little bit about why it's important you understand why you write. Because I know for me that helps with my imposter syndrome when I relate back to that. But could you elaborate more on why is it important to you that you understand why you write?
Yeah, I kind of think it comes back to a lot of things. Like, in life in general, understanding the purpose behind doing something is the motivation for you to do it. It springboards you forward. It helps you remember why you're doing it. And I think especially with writing, it helps you just understand, okay, like when you hit the hard spots, when you get through a full draft and you are dead tired and you have no words left, you can remember, okay, remember why I want to do this. For me, I have to remember I want to build my character strong. I want them to be able to teach people how you can change. I need to go back. I need to change this. I need to fix this. It just helps push me forward to remember, like, this is why I'm here. And I think for you out there, discovering why you write, why you want to be there, is one of the most important things you can do for yourself. because competition and comparing yourselves to others is going to be so much harder if you don't understand why inside you want to write.
Yeah, it's just gonna allow like imposter syndrome and everything to breed and fester and all those horrible things, you know.
Yeah, it's just gonna dig in. It's just gonna dig in deep. And so, remembering why you're there and kind of understanding your own process for yourself is most important. And I kind of want to talk about that too. It takes you can go to 100 classes, you can read 100 books, but understanding your process for yourself takes years of discovery and years of practice and years of persistent doing. You just have to keep trying. And I mean, me and Megan are a few years in and we're still getting through there. You know, like I finished my second manuscript, but I mean, it is a mess. It is a piece of junk. Well, not really, but it's pretty close.
Yeah, give yourself more credit.
Yeah. No, I'm still discovering how I build my characters, how I build my world and my plot around those characters. And it's just, you gotta just keep trying.
I think too, like having that internal motivation and understanding why it's important to you though, as you're going through this try and fail process, because everyone's process is different and you'll hear that from everyone else we bring on here too. And as you talk to your friends about why they write and how they write, but having more of an internal purpose can be more motivating than just I want to get published, because it's just on a deeper level. Because you could probably, I know I personally could brush aside, well, you want to be published, that's why you're writing. Oh, well, you're not good enough to, so just give up, you know. And it's a lot easier to just brush away and like give into your self-doubt if you don't understand your why. But then if you're like, well, I want to be published, but my purpose is not necessarily that, and that's not why I started writing in the first place, and that's not why I tell stories, it just gets you to that deeper level. And I think it comes through in your writing too, when you have that deeper purpose and motivation, because it does help you dive deep into everything from your characters to your plot and your theme. Kind of shifting gears from that, as we're talking about how everyone's process is different, this season we do intend to explore a few different processes and hopefully give you the tools to better help you discover your process. But again, just because we say it works for us or a different author says it works for them doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for you. But the more tools you have, the easier it will be for you to figure that out.
Okay, so yeah, kind of going along with that, I want to say too, one of the important things when it comes to overcoming imposter syndrome and discovering the reason why you write is writing for yourself. I feel like I did that a lot better as a kid, but once you kind of dive in and getting serious, it's just writing for yourself and just writing to write and to get to grow and to be better. So we want to leave you with a challenge, and we are going to reference the amazing Sarah Eden, who was the keynote speaker at Storymakers this last year, and we're going to steal her challenge and reissue it to all of you. Okay, so our challenge is to sit down, write something, some of your best writing, and then just delete it.
Just write it for yourself.
Write it for yourself.
And with that, thank you for listening to episode 1 of How to Survive Until You're Published, the podcast. Because if you're drowning in words, so are we. And you might as well not do it alone.
See you next time.